Can TCU pull up the upset against this Georgia Bulldog team? You know, a team in Georgia that has like vastly more talent, right? Vastly more talent. In a lot of ways, like TCU is playing Michigan, but better. It's like we said all season. Like, yeah, some of the old school styles, only more discipline, more tough, more NFL talent than what Michigan had. So it's like TCU, great job beating Georgia light, but now you have to beat the in-game boss. It's almost like they're fighting in a video game and they thought they had gotten the boss's health bar down, and then all of a sudden he hits his final form, the health bar refills back up, and you're like, holy shit, I got to do this again? And I don't know, Aaron Murray, can TCU create an upset of Georgia?
No. We can give every way that they can happen, but I'm just going to be realistic right now. Like, I do not believe TCU has a shot to win this game. And the line's moving down a little bit. I was giving T-Bob some crap earlier on our pre-show about, have you put my bet in yet? Have you put my bet in? And just a little bit of a teaser, I am going with Georgia to cover the spread. It was at 13.5 on FanDuel, so go on there. Down to 12.5 right now. So T-Bob did a good job being lazy as hell, got me the 12.5, which actually, did you even put the bet in yet, T-Bob? Have you put it in yet?
No, I'm waiting for it to go down to 11.5. Trust me, I got sources.
Put the bet in.
Sharp money moving in. We got sharp money moving in. Just wait, Aaron Murray. Do all your gambling at the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Promo code SNAP's going to help all the boys. Sorry.
All right. So if we do want to create a scenario in which TCU wins, it's not just a couple things that have to happen. There's a lot of things that have to happen in this game for them to have success. One, I think the first thing is pivotal, is it's going to be on the offensive side of the football. Max Duggan has to be great. You can't turn the ball over versus Georgia and expect to win the game. 2 turnovers last week. One wasn't his fault. I mean, the ball hit the dude right in the chest, for goodness sakes, but you can't turn it over. And I think his legs have to be pivotal, just like CJ Stroud was this past week for Ohio State. And that was a little bit of a out of the norm for Ohio State. Georgia's really not expecting for him to run the football. It's not something that you've really studied a lot on tape this season. So Georgia's going to be ready to stop Max Duggan in the red zone on third down conversions. So that's it. I mean, he's going to have the game of his life in order for them to stay on the field, eat up clock, get first downs, and then go out there and execute in the red zone. The one thing on the other side, and I don't know if you've ever faced this defense or not, I doubt you have because it's fairly new, the 3-3-5. It's a little bit different. It's very unique. I faced it a couple times actually in the XFL. Our defense for the Vipers ran it, so I got to see it every day in practice. It's visually, for a quarterback, very different to look at. You just a lot of bodies out there. There's the 3 safeties, 3 linebackers. There's a lot of skill, a lot of speed, and there's not a lot of holes to throw it. So you kind of think like, okay, run the football, we're going to have success. Well, those safeties are eyes in the backfield coming downhill, ready to fill at a 5th, 6th, 7th guy in the box. So it's a tough defense if you haven't seen it a lot. You see it more in the Big 12 because they want to find ways to slow down the RPOs. So for Stetson in this offense to have 7 days to figure out what they want to do against a defense they really haven't faced this entire season could give them some difficulties early, especially if they can't get the run game going. So those are my first 2 big keys. Stay on the field on offense. Max Duggan has to have a hell of a game. He's got to be super active with his legs, which he's done all year. Obviously not to, against a defense like Georgia. And then you have to hope that you can confuse Georgia enough on offense and do it for 4 quarters, not just a half like we saw versus Michigan.
So it's interesting. I think that we arrived at a lot of the same points independently, maybe worded a bit differently, right? Because I have 3 key things. And basically, this is nothing overly creative, right? Like I said, if Georgia represents a better Michigan, okay, let's look at the past as an indicator of future events or future results. And if you want to create a similar result, how did you win against Michigan? Can you then do that against Georgia? And to me, you mentioned confusing them defensively. Yeah, I would put that as like out-coaching them, right? I think that Sonny Dykes and that staff had a much better game plan than Michigan did. I think Michigan entered very overconfident. And it does beg the question, does Georgia enter this game with a similar overconfidence? You mentioned the 3-3-5. The quote that I keep going back to and that I cannot shake is J.J. McCarthy before the game, where he's asked about the 3-3-5 against the Michigan running attack. And despite your aggressive claims and ageism and saying that I have never seen the 3-3-5. This is patently untrue. I played against a couple 3-3-5s in college, including West Virginia. And what's funny is I shared JJ McCarthy's haughty air of like, oh, the 3-3-5, we're going to run all over it, because it makes the box appear to feel so light. And at least in my experience, we ran all over it. It was a problem. Whatever. Michigan thought they were just going to go out there and they were just going to steamroll TCU and that 3-3-5 defense, and TCU confused the hell out of them. They added the fourth guy from all different sorts of angles. And like you said, it is a bit of a lighter defense because it was in the Big 12. It's kind of made to stop the spread in a lot of ways. But TCU proving between last week, what they did against Bijan Robinson, that it can be very effective at stopping elite rushing attacks. And now one of the key differences is they kind of sold out and said, hey, JJ McCarthy, you try to beat us. And he did pretty good job in that. Stetson's going to be even more dangerous. So again, it's Michigan, but more. So you got to outcoach him, which I think is even harder with Kirby staff. You have to show that same incredible mental resilience. Like the thing that jumped off the tape to me with TCU was every time Michigan would have appeared to have wrested momentum away, right? Like especially when it was 41-38, it just felt like, okay, surely this TCU team can't respond again. Like there's so much pent up Michigan aggression from the fans pouring into the stadium. Michigan's just more talented at the end of the day. Surely this is where it ends. And every single time TCU responded. Can you maintain that mental toughness a second game in a row against, again, an even tougher opponent? And then the biggest problem that TCU, I believe, will need to do to win this game is what Chat has talked about a lot. They have to find a way to create a statistical outlier because make no mistakes, that's what 2 pick sixes are. That does not happen very often. And so when it does, your chances of winning that game, regardless of who's better, go up significantly. So do you get Georgia fumbling at the 1, right? It's not just the pick sixes. Michigan also fumbling at the 1. Do you get something like that? Do you get a special teams touchdown, a kick return for a touchdown? Can you create some sort of wild outlier that then creates an upset? Do you go for it a lot on 4th down and just say, F it, we're going to throw everything against the wall and see what happens? Like the problem is that everything that I just laid out is not likely. I just think that it's probably the path. It's just a small percentage chance that path can be taken.
Well, I also you don't want to play like out of your shoes. So I had the Alabama Kansas State game over the weekend, and covering that game, obviously Kansas State looked at this as we have to do, like we just talked about, all these things right in order to beat Alabama. We have to score touchdowns on special teams. We have to be excellent on 4th down and go for it at times. We have to do fake kickoffs and onside kicks and all this stuff in order to have success for Alabama. Where you looked at the first quarter of the game, they were dominating, they were winning, they were having they were executing on both sides of the football. Then all of a sudden in the second quarter, they start trying to go for it on 4th down. They try to fake kick to start the second half off. Start doing all these things, thinking they have to play out of their shoes in order to win the football game. When really their most success is when they just lined up and played football. And I think that's something that TCU needs to realize. Like, hey, man, you're in the Natty. You've had a hell of a year. You've won some big-time games, and I would say really good conference in the Big 12, a competitive conference. You beat Michigan. You don't need to feel like you have to do a million things in order to have success. Like that should be their mentality. Their mentality needs to be like, hey, man, we got a great quarterback. We have an athletic quarterback. We have one of the top receivers in America. We'll see what their running back situation looks like, how healthy he's going to be after this week. We've had a defense that has played better I would say the last 2 months of the season, or the last month of the actual regular season, played pretty well for the first half versus Michigan. Like, we are a good football team. You deserve to be there. Don't freak yourself out before the game even starts. It would be my message in that locker room right now. And then the problem is that they're probably going to think like that because you're facing the national champions from last year. You're facing an undefeated Georgia football team. You're facing a team that is right now projected to beat you by almost 2 touchdowns. And in the mental side of the game, I always talk about it, T. The mental side of the game is a big deal. And I just hope they don't outthink themselves heading into this matchup.
So, Aaron, this is where I don't know, though, man. I don't know, though, because I could see this logic working either way, right? Because to me, you're basically saying, be yourself. Be yourself. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can beat Georgia. Just be yourself. Can you beat Georgia if you're yourself? You're the kind of like you look like Max Duggan.
I'm
Georgia
not
looks like
saying
Brad Pitt. Like, are you going to win the girl if you're just yourself, or are you going to have to get into pickup artist technique? So you're going to have to peacock a little bit, throw a crazy askance top hat on and like a feather boa or something. Like, I'm a big Malcolm Gladwell fan, and in his book David versus Goliath, he talks about how in sports a lot of times when you're trying to affect an upset, sometimes it means you have to engage in risky behaviors that could make the final score way worse in the end. So maybe you end up losing worse, but are also arguably your best path to success, right? It's like pulling the goalie at the end of a hockey game or something, right? Like gives you a better chance to score, but you're also opening yourself up. But that's kind of like the mindset.
But did they do anything crazy? Did they do anything crazy versus Michigan? I mean, I didn't see anything crazy in that game. They executed. They played their game, and they played a complete team effort. And
no, to your point, yes, I agree.
They were not,
but I don't think they can do that.
Crazy.
But I agree, but I don't think they can do that against Georgia. I think you are going to have some sort of gadget big play, some sort of big swing created by a fourth down conversion, something along those lines. And I think you got to think very seriously about it, because if you don't, you're going to be playing Georgia's game. You're going to get lulled in, and they will grind you down eventually. And like I said, if you force it into Stetson's hands somehow, like if TCU does get that big lead and you force it into Stetson's hands over McCarthy, that's still probably ideal, but it's going to be tougher to beat Stetson in that scenario than it was McCarthy. I mean, just look at what Bennett did in last year's championship. Look at what he just did in the playoff. We have breaking news. So finish up your last TCU
real quick.
UGA thoughts.
I think TCU, last thing real quick before we have the breaking news, TCU just needs to get to the fourth quarter. They have been the best fourth quarter football team in America. So I get your whole mindset of like, let's go for the jugular. Let's go big. We have to do something crazy, and we may lose big, but this may give us our only opportunity to win. I get that. But also the way that they've been able to mentally and physically execute in the fourth quarter to win games over and over and over again this season. To me, if you go big and don't execute, you don't give yourself an opportunity to be in a position where you have executed, like I said, better than anyone else in America this season. This is the best fourth quarter team out there. Can you get it to the fourth quarter and then go out there and do what you've done all season long?
Yeah, so Jacob Fogel in the chat space saying the same thing. He says, keep it close, get to the fourth, get weird. And yes, that's all well and good, but I think that weirdness is going to have to come in eventually. And maybe it's not in some sort of overarching strategical situation. Maybe it is just getting a bit lucky and creating these sort of long odds turnovers that don't happen. I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Just lining up and going toe-to-toe with Georgia, though, has not worked out for many thus far. And it's funny that a lot of the Georgia fans are the ones saying, just line up and play your game. Just play your game. Don't do anything exotic. Don't do anything weird. Don't do anything weird. Don't do anything unexpected.
Just come to daddy.
Just play. Just do exactly what you've done on film.